He was leaving the stables until the master's wife whispered, "Don't go yet." The sky was still more night than morning when the boy pushed open the old stable door, its hinges sighing loud enough to echo across the sleeping fields. Dew clung to the grass like thin silver threads, and the cool air carried the heavy scent of horses, hay, and last night's rain. He had worked these stables since he was barely tall enough to reach a saddle, and he moved now with the quiet confidence of someone who knew every wooden beam, every creak in the loft, every shadow that hid between the stalls. His name was Josiah, though most on the plantation called him Boy, even though he had grown into a strong young man. His shoulders were broader now, his back hardened from lifting bales and hauling feed, and the faint outline of a beard had begun to show along his jaw. Still, he kept his head down, as every slave learned early, and moved carefully through a world that allowed him little room for mistakes. This morning felt different though. He didn't know why, not yet, but something in the air carried a heaviness, as if the dawn itself was holding its breath. He noticed how the horses seemed uneasy, shifting in their stalls, snorting softly. A few stamped the ground as he passed. "Easy now," he whispered in his low, calming voice. "Ain't nothing bothering you but the wind." He laid out the feed, checked the water buckets, tightened a few loose straps, and swept the walkway clear of last night's straw. His routine was always the same, but his mind wasn't. He kept glancing toward the large barn doors he had come through, half expecting someone to appear. The overseer, Mr. Halpern, was usually up before sunrise, making sure no slave lingered or stole a moment of rest. But today Josiah hadn't heard Halpern's boots crunching across the yard, hadn't heard his sharp whistle slicing through the quiet. That silence alone was strange enough. The overseer never missed an opportunity to catch someone doing something wrong. Josiah paused to fix a lantern that had tilted on its nail, its weak flame flickering as if the morning breeze wanted to swallow it whole. He touched the metal, warm from the fire inside, and held it steady until the flame settled. That was when he heard it. A soft rustle. Bootsteps. Fabric brushing wood. His whole body went still. He slowly turned toward the far corner of the stable, where shadows lived even in daylight. For a moment he thought he was imagining things. But there, just beyond the last stall, movement. Someone was inside with him. He took a step, careful and measured. "Who's there?" he asked, though quietly enough that if it was Halpern, he wouldn't immediately regret calling out. The shape moved again, stepping from darkness into the faint morning light that crept through the stable slats. And when he saw who it was, Josiah's heart climbed straight into his throat. It was the master's wife, Mrs. Corabeth Langley. She stood with her hands tucked close to her chest, her breath sharp and unsteady. Her blonde hair, usually pinned neatly behind her head, was loose today, strands falling across her face as if she had rushed out of the house in a hurry. She wore a pale blue dress, but the hem was dusted with dirt, as though she had walked across the yard without noticing where she stepped. Josiah bowed his head immediately, eyes fixed to the floor. He didn't dare stare at the mistress, not when slaves weren't even supposed to look her in the eyes unless spoken to. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, respectful, cautious. "I ain't know you was here. I can leave if—" "No," she said quickly. Her voice cracked. "Don't go." The words caught him completely off guard. He wasn't used to hearing urgency in a white woman's voice directed at him, especially the mistress. He straightened slightly but kept his eyes lowered. "Ma'am," he said again, careful. "You need something?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, her footsteps barely pressing against the straw-covered ground. In the dim stable light, he could see her hands shaking, not dramatically, but enough that he noticed. She wasn't here by accident. She wasn't wandering. Something had driven her out to the stables before sunrise, and whatever it was had her frightened. She took a breath that sounded like she had been holding the weight of something heavy for too long. "Josiah," she whispered, "I need you to stay a moment." That wasn't normal. She never said his name unless she had to. No white woman had reason to whisper to a slave in an empty stable at dawn unless there was danger, real danger, hanging in the air. Josiah's heartbeat thudded like distant thunder beneath his ribs. He kept his gaze low, but his mind raced through possibilities. Had something happened on the plantation? Was the master ill? Was Halpern looking for someone to blame again? The mistress looked over her shoulder as if she feared someone watching. No one was there. The yard outside was quiet except for a few birds waking in the trees. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured, half to herself. "But I had no choice." Josiah didn't speak. He didn't move. He waited, because that was all he could safely do. She stepped even closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender soap, fancy, expensive, the kind that reminded him of how different her world was from his. "You must listen to me," she said softly. "And listen carefully." Her voice trembled on those words. Josiah nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She drew another breath and looked toward the stable door again, her nerves tightening her posture. And that was when she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to the faintest whisper, a warning wrapped in fear. "Don't go yet." The words lingered in the cold morning air, heavy with meaning he didn't yet understand. But he felt it, deep down, in that place where instincts warned a man of storms long before the clouds appeared. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And whatever it was, she didn't want him walking out into it. He could feel her fear like a chill crawling across the back of his neck. Josiah swallowed, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his chest. "What happened, ma'am?" But she didn't answer right away. She only looked toward the doorway again, as if expecting someone to walk in at any second. The horses shifted restlessly, as if they too sensed something uneasy creeping into the morning, and the first hint of dawn light spilled through the cracks in the stable wall, stretching long shadows across the floor like dark fingers reaching toward them. Something was about to break. He could feel it. And he knew, without needing to hear another word, that whatever the mistress was about to say would change the day, maybe the whole plantation, sharply and dangerously. The moment stretched longer than Josiah liked, long enough that even the horses sensed the unease and shifted again in their stalls. A thin ray of sunlight pushed through the cracks in the boards, catching flecks of dust that drifted between him and the mistress like faint, floating sparks. Mrs. Langley was still standing too close, closer than any white woman would stand near a slave unless something urgent was pulling her there. Her breath trembled, her hands tightened around themselves, and she glanced over her shoulder again before speaking. Finally, she said in a voice barely louder than a breath, "Something has happened. Something terrible." Josiah kept his eyes down, though every part of him sharpened to attention. On plantations, terrible could mean anything, from sickness to violence to rumors that could get men whipped or worse. He waited, afraid to lift his head, afraid not to. Mrs. Langley swallowed hard, as if forcing herself forward. "Last night," she whispered, "there was an argument in the house. My husband and Halpern. They spoke of you." Josiah felt the cold rush under his skin the way a man did when he heard a distant storm roll in. His fists tightened unconsciously at his sides. "Me, ma'am?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking just enough to reveal the truth. She was scared. Not of him. Of what she had heard. "I don't know everything they said. I only heard pieces. But it was enough." She stepped a little farther into the light, her face pale and strained. The morning air wasn't cold enough to make anyone shiver, but she did. "Halpern told my husband you were involved in something. Something wrong." She looked around again, lowering her voice even more. "He wants to make an example of someone, and he chose you." Josiah felt something heavy settle in the pit of his stomach. Halpern choosing someone to make an example of was no small thing. It meant Halpern thought the slaves were getting comfortable, too confident, too bold. Overseers like him liked to remind the enslaved of their place with lash, accusation, or worse. "Ma'am," Josiah said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I ain't done nothing. I ain't talked back. I ain't broken rules." I know. Her reply was immediate, sharper than he expected. I know, Josiah. You've always been careful. He didn't miss the hesitation in her voice, the way she caught herself before saying a word that might have meant too much or sounded too soft. She looked away quickly. You're innocent, she whispered. But Halpern doesn't care whether a slave is innocent. No, he didn't. Over the years, Josiah had seen the overseer punish men for looking tired, punish boys for dropping a pail, punish an elderly woman for working too slowly when her joints were swollen like ripe fruit. Halpern didn't need reasons. He loved the power more than he loved the rules. Josiah felt his breath hitch, though he kept his face still. What'd he say I done? Mrs. Langley hesitated again, her throat tightening. I don't know exactly. I only heard parts through the door. Something about tools gone missing from the shed. Something about you being seen walking near the smokehouse after dark. Halpern told my husband that you were planning something. He used the word rebellious. The word landed like a blow. A slave being called rebellious was enough to justify almost anything. Josiah took a slow breath and whispered, Ma'am, I been in the stables every night same as always. I ain't even go near the smokehouse. I believe you, she said again. And she did. Her face showed it. Fear wasn't the only thing in her expression. There was worry, deep, personal worry, for what might happen if no one stepped in. She moved closer, lowering her voice to the faintest whisper. Halpern means to accuse someone today, and if he tells my husband again, he will choose you. Josiah didn't know what to say, didn't know what he could say. His throat felt thick. Mrs. Langley looked toward the doorway again, her eyes narrowing. And if he punishes you for something you didn't do, no one will stop him, not even my husband. She moved her hand to her mouth, holding it there for a moment as she tried to calm her breath. You have to be careful today. Stay away from Halpern if you can. Don't go anywhere alone. Josiah nodded slightly. Yes, ma'am. But she wasn't done. The fear in her eyes had not softened. In fact, it had grown sharper, more urgent, as though she had said the easy part first, and now the harder truth remained. There's more, she said. He heard the tremor. He felt the stables tighten with it. I heard Halpern say something else. Something he didn't mean for my husband to catch. She wasn't looking at him anymore. Her eyes stared at the far wall, like the words frightened her even to repeat. He said, I'll get rid of the boy myself if I have to. Josiah felt the stable floor tilt beneath him. Get rid of. Those words could mean 100 things, and none of them good. Mrs. Langley pressed a hand to her chest. He wasn't just talking about punishment. He meant something worse. The horses snorted uneasily again, as if answering the heavy silence between them. Josiah took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Why he after me? Why now? That question. The one that made Mrs. Langley's eyes drop to the floor. She hesitated, too long, long enough for the truth to darken the space between them. Finally, she whispered, Someone lied. Someone told Halpern that they saw you sneaking behind the shed last night. Someone said you were meeting with others. She shook her head. I don't know. But Josiah did. He didn't need proof. He could see the face in his mind immediately. Elias, a slave boy not much older than him, whose jealous streak was as sharp as a blade. Elias who resented how the master trusted Josiah with the horses. Elias who hated how often Josiah was near the main house delivering reports on the animals. Elias had whispered lies before, and Halpern liked lies that made his job easier. Mrs. Langley took a step back, her breath unsteady again. Josiah, she said softly, you are in danger today. He nodded, because he understood all too well. But then her voice changed, still soft, but firmer, like someone making a decision in the middle of a storm. You must do exactly as I say. Every word. If you want to survive today. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't follow if Halpern calls you out of sight. Don't let him take you behind the sheds or into the woods. Stay in open places, where others can see you. Her urgency hit him like cold water. Yes, ma'am. And one more thing. Her voice dropped to barely more than breath. If Halpern tries to pull you aside, you run. Those words were the most dangerous she had spoken yet. A white woman telling a slave boy to run. That could cost her everything. Josiah looked up, just a fraction of a second. But he saw fear on her face mixed with something else, conviction. She meant it, and she didn't care about the risk. Then she whispered something that chilled him to the bone. He's already looking for you. Right then, the sound of heavy boots slammed against the ground outside, fast, angry steps crunching through the morning dirt. The stable door rattled. A shadow swept across the sunlight slit. Halpern. He was coming. And Josiah understood, with sickening clarity, that the warning had come just in time. The moment the stable door shook under a heavy fist, Mrs. Langley's entire body went rigid. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a heartbeat neither she nor Josiah moved. The horses stirred restlessly, their hooves scraping against the wooden floors as if they sensed the danger before Josiah even fully felt it settle in his bones. The mistress's whisper came fast, sharp, almost breaking. Get behind the feed barrels. Now! Josiah hesitated for the briefest second, not out of doubt, but out of shock that she was commanding him to hide. He had never in his life hidden from a white man at a white woman's order. But this wasn't a normal morning, and Halpern's boots outside made that clearer than anything else. He ducked behind the tall stack of barrels filled with oats, the rough wood scraping his arm as he squeezed into the narrow gap, just as the stable door flew open. The sound cracked through the quiet morning like a whip, and Halpern stepped inside with the confidence of a man who believed every space on the plantation belonged to him. His boots were caked with drying mud, his shirt wrinkled from sleep or drink, and his jaw was tight with irritation. His eyes darted immediately to Mrs. Langley, and he slowed his pace, offering a stiff nod. "Ma'am, didn't expect to see you out here so early." Mrs. Langley steadied herself, lifting her chin in the delicate yet firm posture of someone who had been raised to hide her fear. "The horses were restless last night. I wanted to be sure they were all right." Halpern narrowed his eyes slightly. "You shouldn't be out here alone. Not safe at this hour." Josiah held his breath behind the barrels. He couldn't see Halpern's face, only his boots pacing slowly through the straw. But he felt the overseer's suspicion like thickening air. Mrs. Langley took a careful breath. "I needed some fresh air." The house felt confining. Halpern's boots shifted, the toe of one tapping the ground. "You seen Josiah?" "Boy's not at the quarters, not at the troughs, not in the yard." "Thought he'd be here." Her pause was slight, just a fraction of a second, but enough to make Josiah's heart slam against his ribs. "I haven't seen him," she said, calm on the surface though her knuckles whitened in her clasped hands. Halpern grunted, unconvinced. "Someone said they saw him walking around last night. Said he was out after hours." Mrs. Langley tilted her head slightly. "Did they?" "It's my job to check such things," Halpern replied, with a hint of defiance. "It's my job to make sure no trouble's brewing." "Are you suggesting he was causing trouble?" she asked, her tone still soft but laced with enough steel to make Halpern pause. Halpern cleared his throat. "Only saying. Someone's been moving things around the shed. Tools missing. Strange footprints. I ain't pointing fingers." "Yet," she murmured. Halpern's boots stopped. "Ma'am?" She met his gaze directly. "You said someone told you they saw Josiah wandering last night." "Who?" Halpern hesitated, caught off guard. "Just another boy. Elias. Said he saw something." Of course it was Elias. Josiah clenched his jaw, but stayed still as stone. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed. "Elias? The same one who claimed the farrier misplaced his own tools last month?" Halpern shifted, uncomfortable. "He said he saw Josiah. Did he provide proof?" "Boys like him don't think to." "Then you shouldn't think to accuse on his word alone," she said, the firmness in her voice surprising even herself. Halpern drew in a slow breath. "With respect, ma'am. Your husband hired me to keep order, to prevent rebellion. I take any talk of sneaking around real serious." And I take false accusations seriously, she said sharply. The two stood in tense silence. Halpern's boots shuffled, grinding grit beneath them. Josiah stayed pressed against the barrels, breath held, praying the horses wouldn't react loudly enough to reveal him. Finally, Halpern muttered, "I'll keep looking. He turns up, he's got questions to answer." Mrs. Langley's voice cooled. "If you find him, send him to the house. I'll speak to him myself." That stopped Halpern mid-stride. "You?" "Ma'am, that ain't proper. A slave accused of." "I said I will speak to him." Halpern bristled visibly, though Josiah couldn't see his face. "As you wish." He turned, boots thudding heavily as he stalked toward the stable door. But just before he stepped out, he paused. Josiah felt the air shift. Halpern felt something, suspected something. The overseer slowly turned back. "Funny thing, though," he said in a low voice. "These horses seem calmer now, like someone's already been here this morning." Mrs. Langley didn't blink. "I told you. I was here." He let that sit for a moment. Then, "You're a fine lady, ma'am, but you ain't the one who feeds 'em." A beat of silence. Mrs. Langley answered carefully. "The boy didn't come in this morning to check them. I would have seen him." "Then who fed 'em?" Halpern pressed gently, as if trying to catch the slightest crack in her composure. She met his eyes evenly, her tone cool. "I did." Halpern scoffed faintly. "You? Feed horses?" "Yes." She didn't flinch. "I know more about these animals than you assume, Mr. Halpern." The overseer studied her, searching her face for anything that didn't align. But years of being the master's wife had taught her how to hide fear behind dignity. At last, Halpern grunted something under his breath and turned again, shoving open the stable door with more force than needed. Sunlight spilled in as he stepped out across the yard. The door swung shut behind him. Only when his footsteps faded did Mrs. Langley let out a shaky breath and press her hand against the nearest stall to steady herself. She stayed still for several seconds, gathering herself, then whispered, "You can come out now." Josiah emerged slowly, heart pounding, sweat cooling on his back despite the morning chill. He expected anger, frustration, maybe even fear in her eyes. But instead there was something deeper. The undeniable weight of responsibility. "You saved me," he whispered. Mrs. Langley shook her head faintly. "No, not yet. I only bought you time." Her voice cracked as she continued. "Halpern will search the barns, the smokehouse, the quarters, and he will find Elias again. That boy will weave more lies if it keeps him out of Halpern's path." Josiah folded his hands behind him, trying to appear calm despite the tremor in his limbs. "Mem, I can't hide all day." "No," she agreed. "You can't." She looked toward the house, the morning light illuminating her worried expression. "There is something you must know. What I overheard last night wasn't just talk. Halpern told my husband he needed permission to deal with a growing threat. Those were his words." Josiah's throat went dry. "Growing threat," he repeated solemnly. "He wasn't referring to tools," she whispered. "He was referring to people." A long silence hung between them, heavy as humidity before a storm. Josiah's voice came out quieter, steadier than he felt inside. "You saying he planning something?" She pressed her lips together tightly. "Halpern believes someone is stirring unrest among the slaves. He thinks if he crushes one person, makes an example, he can silence the rest." "And he chose me," Josiah said. It wasn't a question. Mrs. Langley nodded slowly, her eyes filled with something he rarely saw from her. "Guilt. Because you're respected among the others. You work hard. You keep order in the stables. People listen to you. Halpern fears influence in the hands of anyone he cannot control." A harsh wind swept through the yard outside, rattling the stable roof. She stepped closer, lowering her voice again. "You must not be alone. Not once today. Halpern is desperate. A desperate man is dangerous." Josiah felt a strange mix of fear and determination rising in him. "What you want me to do?" She looked toward the house again, conflicted. "Come to the porch in an hour. I'll tell my husband I need help moving something inside." If you are with me, Halpern cannot touch you. Josiah's breath slowed. The mistress was risking far more than she admitted. A white woman defending a slave from her overseer was an act that would raise questions, dangerous ones. Ma'am, why you helping me? She closed her eyes briefly, a tremor passing across her features. When she opened them, she spoke with quiet, unwavering certainty. Because what Halpern wants to do is wrong, and someone has to stop him. Josiah swallowed hard. At that moment, the sun finally broke over the horizon, casting long, deep shadows across the yard, shadows that stretched toward the stable like warnings. Mrs. Langley straightened her posture, gathering her courage. Go now, she said softly. Stay in open places. Don't let him corner you. Josiah nodded, lifting his chin slightly despite the trembling exhaustion creeping through him. Yes, ma'am. He stepped out into the dawn, the cool air brushing his face, and he sensed Halpern somewhere not far away, already hunting. The day crawled forward with a heaviness that pressed on every corner of the plantation. Nothing felt steady anymore. Not the barn, not the yard, not the air that hung thick like a warning. Daniel walked with his head lowered, but his eyes kept scanning, searching for Isaac, searching for signs of trouble he couldn't yet name. Strange how danger could move silently, slipping through the grass like a snake, never loud until it struck. That was how the overseer worked. Quiet, watchful, patient. Daniel knew he was planning something. Men like him always did. The plantation bustled with its usual morning routines, slaves moving in lines, tending to chores, pretending that nothing had happened the night before. But every now and then, someone glanced Daniel's way, their expression a mix of fear and gratitude. They had heard enough in whispers to know he had stepped in against the overseer's command. They knew he had risked himself, but knowing didn't mean they could help him. Not when the overseer still held authority like a fist around their throats. Isaac found Daniel near the woodpile, chopping logs the way the master liked them split. Clean, even, neat. You heard yet? Isaac said quietly, pretending to sort pieces of firewood. Heard what? Daniel asked, though he already felt the answer settle cold in his chest. The overseer's been talking to master. Isaac kept his eyes down. Said you interfered with discipline. Said you put hands on him. Daniel's jaw tightened. He swung first. Don't matter, Isaac whispered. With a man like him, truth don't stand long next to his word. Daniel kept swinging the axe, each strike harder than the last. So he's trying to get me whipped. He's trying to get you gone, Isaac corrected. Off this land. Sold. He swallowed. Or worse. Daniel stood still for a moment. The barn doors. Mrs. Bell's voice. The whip raised over that little boy. The look on the overseer's face when Daniel blocked him. Yes, this was always where it was heading. Where is the overseer now? Daniel asked. Isaac's answer was a quiet breath. Looking for a way to corner you where master ain't around to see. Daniel nodded once. Then I best keep to open places. Daniel, you sure you know what you doing? No, Daniel said. But I know what I ain't gonna do run. He took a steady breath, lifting the axe again. If I run, he wins. Isaac hesitated, then walked off, leaving Daniel working under the watching sun. But Daniel didn't stay long. He had been waiting for a chance to find Mrs. Bell, to warn her too. She was out in the garden with the cook's helpers, giving instructions on herbs the master wanted dried for winter. Her hair was pinned up, but Daniel noticed her hands tremble slightly as she worked. When she glanced up and saw him walking past, her eyes changed, sharper, concerned. She placed a basket down and walked toward him as if checking the rose bushes, forcing herself to look like she wasn't speaking to him at all. What's happening? She murmured without facing him. The overseer talked to master, Daniel whispered. He's twisted the whole story. Mrs. Bell's lips tightened. Of course he has. He's desperate now. She plucked a leaf and inspected it like it mattered. He feels threatened, cornered. Dangerous men react worst when cornered. Daniel glanced around, making sure no one watched too closely. He wants me punished. He wants you silenced, she corrected softly. A chill trailed down Daniel's spine. She pretended to study the garden again. I warned you he would not let last night passive. Daniel hesitated. Why? Why did you step in? Back in the barn? For a brief second, her mask slipped. Because I saw a boy about to lose his future, and I saw a man about to be destroyed for trying to protect it. She inhaled shackily, regaining herself. Some things I will not stand by for. Before Daniel could reply, the kitchen door swung open sharply. The overseer walked out. He froze, just for a fraction of a breath, seeing Daniel and Mrs. Bell in too close proximity. Then his expression changed into something dark and knowing, something dangerous. Mrs. Bell straightened quickly and pretended she had only been adjusting the vines on a trellis. Daniel stepped back instinctively. The overseer gave Daniel a slow, venomous smile. There you are, he said. He didn't speak to Mrs. Bell. He never dared. His eyes were all for Daniel. Master wants him at the barn. No. Daniel felt his heartbeat thump once, hard. Mrs. Bell's breath hitched. For what? She asked, keeping her voice level. The overseer glanced at her briefly, then back to Daniel. To settle last night's disrespect. Mrs. Bell stepped forward. He saved a child from being hurt. That ain't your place to say, ma'am, the overseer replied, keeping a false politeness that fooled no one. Daniel straightened his shoulders. I'll go. No, Mrs. Bell said sharply before she could stop herself. Daniel and the overseer both looked at her. Her throat worked. Master should hear both sides, and he won't if you bring Daniel alone. The overseer's smirk widened. Didn't say he'd be alone. He leaned in closer to Daniel, lowering his voice to a blade-like whisper. I said Master wanted him. I never said Master would be waiting. Something cold slipped down Daniel's spine. He knew exactly what that meant. Mrs. Bell's eyes filled with quiet panic. You're staging this, she said under her breath. You want him hurt. Perhaps worse. The overseer didn't answer aloud, but the look in his eyes confirmed everything. Daniel looked at Mrs. Bell for just a beat, not asking for help, not begging, just letting her see that he understood what he was walking into, and that he was ready. He stepped forward. Let's go. The overseer jerked his head toward the barn and walked ahead, boots crunching on gravel. Daniel followed, each step heavier than the one before. Behind them, Mrs. Bell's voice floated low and fierce across the yard. Daniel, she called, trying not to draw attention. He turned slightly. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Stay alive. He nodded once, a slow and steady promise, though he wasn't sure he could keep it. The path to the barn felt longer than it ever had. There were moments when Daniel wondered if he should turn and run, but every time the thought came, he forced it out. Running was fear. Running was surrender. Running would leave Isaac and the others alone with a man who had already shown what he was willing to do. No, he had to face this. When they reached the barn, the overseer opened the door and gestured inside. Daniel stepped through, bracing himself. The barn was empty. No master, no witnesses, just ropes hanging from a beam, a table with tools laid out neatly, a heavy silence. The overseer stepped in behind him and closed the door. Master ain't coming, he said at last. This is between you and me. Daniel stood very still. The overseer moved toward the table and ran his fingers over the tools. Not a whip. Not this time. Something worse. Something personal. You think stopping me last night makes you some hero? He sneered. Makes you better than me? Makes you worth saving? Daniel didn't speak. The overseer grabbed a short-handled baton and turned back to him. You embarrass me, he whispered. In front of slaves. In front of her. Oh. There it was. The real reason. The real wound. He couldn't stand that Mrs. Bell had seen Daniel stand against him, stand stronger than him. Daniel finally spoke. I did what was right. The overseer's face twisted. Right? He moved closer. Right is whatever keeps order. Whatever master says it is. Whatever I decide it is. He took another step. Daniel didn't back away. "You got one chance," the overseer said, voice low and dangerous. "Kneel. Admit you overstepped, and I'll make the rest of this quick." Daniel looked him straight in the eye. "No." The overseer's expression snapped into rage. And then he swung. The baton whipped through the air with a sharp crack aimed at Daniel's head. Daniel ducked, the blow smashing into the wooden post behind him. Before the overseer could swing again, Daniel backed toward the center of the barn, trying to move where he had space. "You should have knelt," the overseer bellowed. He charged. Daniel stepped aside, but the baton still clipped his shoulder with a sickening thud. Pain shot down his arm, but he held his ground. The overseer swung again, wild with fury. Daniel blocked the next blow with his forearm, pain flaring up like fire. He stumbled backward. Another swing, another dodge, another hit. The overseer was faster than Daniel expected, driven not by technique, but by rage. Daniel tried to grab his arm, but the overseer slammed a knee into his ribs, knocking the breath from his lungs. Daniel fell to one knee. The overseer raised the baton high, ready to bring it down on Daniel's skull. "This ends now," he roared. But just as the baton dropped, the barn door burst open, and everything changed in an instant. The door slammed open so hard it struck the inside wall and bounced back, flooding the barn with morning light. The overseer froze mid-swing, the baton still raised in the air above Daniel's bowed head. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Dust drifted lazily in the glowing doorway, and the silhouette standing there looked almost unreal, until the voice cut through the barn like a blade. "Step away from him." Mrs. Bell's figure sharpened against the sunlight. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, as if she had run the entire way. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her face flushed with fear and anger she was barely holding together. The overseer blinked at her, stunned, then tried to compose himself. "Ma'am, this is plantation discipline. Master's orders." "No," she snapped, stepping forward with unexpected boldness. "Master gave no such order, because Master never heard the truth. You made sure of that." Daniel, still kneeling on one knee, tried to stand, but pain shot through his shoulder and ribs. Mrs. Bell's gaze flicked to him, frantic, terrified, but she didn't allow herself to show it for long. The overseer straightened up, gripping the baton tighter. "You don't understand what's needed to keep order among these. Don't you finish that sentence," she warned. And the overseer saw something new in her eyes. Not fear, not propriety, not the usual quiet composure plantation women carried like a second skin. No, he saw defiance. Dangerous defiance. He shook his head slowly. "You got no right to interfere in discipline. That boy stepped out of line yesterday, and he's stepping out of line now. I'm the overseer here. My word stands." Mrs. Bell took another step toward them, her voice low and controlled. "Your word is nothing when it's built on lies." He opened his mouth to protest again, but she cut him off. "I know what happened last night. I know why you're doing this. And if you touch him again, I will make sure my husband hears every detail." The overseer's expression changed. Something calculating flashed across it. He took a slow breath. "Ma'am," he said, softening his tone, "you're making trouble where there don't need to be none. The slave interfered with me. He defied me. That's grounds for punishment. Grounds for removal." Mrs. Bell's voice sharpened. "He saved a child from you. That's the truth. And if you punish him for it, I will speak. I will testify." Daniel saw the shift happen in real time. The overseer wasn't scared of Daniel. He was scared of her. Finally, he looked at Daniel, bleeding, bruised, barely standing, and scoffed. "You think this protects him? You think you protect him?" Then he laughed. A short, cruel sound. "No, ma'am. All you did was make it worse for everyone. If I can't punish him direct." His eyes slid back to Daniel, cold and venomous. "Then I'll make sure something else finds him. An accident, a disappearance, something no one can trace." Mrs. Bell's breath caught. Daniel felt something heavy settle in his chest. The overseer wasn't bluffing. A man like him, he'd follow through. Quietly, brutally. And then, unbelievably, the overseer stepped closer to Mrs. Bell. Too close. Trying to intimidate her. "You think your husband's gonna believe your word over mine?" he asked darkly. "You've been too interested in that slave all morning. Folks have eyes. Folks see things. What do you think they gon' whisper if you keep interfering like this?" The implication landed like a slap across the air. Mrs. Bell froze. Not from guilt, from outrage. Her face flushed, and her voice shook, not with fear, but fury. "How dare you?" The overseer smirked. "Careful, ma'am. You don't want rumors falling the wrong way. Could ruin your reputation. Could ruin a lot more." Daniel felt his stomach twist. The overseer was threatening her now. He was cornering her with a lie as vicious as any whip. Mrs. Bell swallowed. "I won't let you harm him." The overseer shrugged. "Can't touch him now. Not with you staring me down. But accidents happen. Slaves wander off. Swamps take men. Snakes, too. A shame, really." Daniel knew this was a direct promise, and Mrs. Bell understood it as well. She moved instinctively, stepping closer to Daniel, placing herself between him and the overseer as if shielding him. "Leave this barn," she ordered quietly. "Now!" The overseer studied her a long moment, his jaw twitching. He was angry, no, humiliated. Worse than last night. Twice now she had stopped him. Twice now Daniel had stood against him. That was a wound a man like him couldn't let heal. At last, he spat at the ground and pointed a finger at Daniel. "You won't see me coming, boy." Then to her. "And you, best hope master don't start asking questions." With that, he turned and strode out of the barn, slamming the door behind him. Silence fell. Daniel stood breathing hard, the pain settling into his body now that adrenaline was fading. Mrs. Bell rushed to him instantly. "Sit, please, sit," she urged. "You're hurt." Daniel leaned against a post, one hand pressed to his ribs. She knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she reached toward his arm to check the bruise. She stopped before touching him, hesitating. "May I?" she whispered. Daniel nodded once. She lifted his sleeve gently. Dark bruises were already blooming across his shoulder and forearm. She let out a soft, horrified breath. "He would have killed you," she said. "He meant to." Daniel exhaled slowly. "I know." She closed her eyes, steadying herself. "I don't know how much time we have. He will move quickly now, faster than we can prepare. He said he'd make it look like an accident." "He will," she said. "You must be careful. Never walk the fields alone. Never go to the swamp side. Never take orders from him unless someone else is present." Daniel watched her face, genuine fear etched into every line. Not fear for herself, fear for him. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "You barely know me." Her eyes lifted to his, full of something raw, human, honest. "Because I refuse to let a man die for doing what was right. Because cruelty is not order. And because—" her voice softened. "Because you didn't cry out when he struck you. You didn't kneel. You didn't break. The overseer hates men he cannot break." Daniel looked down, breathing through another wave of pain. "He ain't done." "No," she whispered. "He's not." They both turned when the barn door creaked again. Daniel tensed automatically, but it wasn't the overseer. It was Isaac. He slipped inside quickly, closing the door behind him. His eyes widened when he saw the bruises. "Lord," Isaac breathed. "He got to you already." Daniel nodded slightly. Isaac looked between Daniel and Mrs. Bell. Half the quarters heard the overseer storming off, yelling he gone handle things his way. He swallowed. "Whatever that means." "It means danger," Mrs. Bell said. "For all of us." Her voice dropped. "We need to decide what happens next." Daniel frowned. "Decide?" She nodded, gathering her courage. "We have three choices." She looked at Isaac too, including him. 1. We do nothing. We hope the overseer cools down. That is the most dangerous option. 2. We go to my husband. Tell him the truth. But if he refuses to believe us, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. And the third? Daniel asked. Her eyes met his, steady and serious. Daniel must stay within sight of others at all times. No night chores. No isolated tasks. No following the overseer anywhere. If he tries to force you, you run. Straight to me. Immediately. Isaac nodded vigorously. That's the best one. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't used to protection. He wasn't used to choices. He wasn't used to anyone standing beside him. He finally nodded. Then that's what we do. Mrs. Bell exhaled in relief, then stood. We will get through this, she whispered, as if promising it to herself as much as them. But even as she said it, all three of them knew something important. This wasn't the end. This was the calm before the worst storm yet. The overseer wouldn't forget the humiliation. He wouldn't let go of the anger. He wouldn't accept his authority being challenged twice in less than a day. No, he would come back. And next time, he wouldn't rely on punishment. He would rely on something far more lethal. As Mrs. Bell helped Daniel to his feet and Isaac supported him on the other side, Daniel realized something else. Part of surviving this wasn't just about watching for the overseer. It was about recognizing that this plantation, this world, was shifting. Lines were being crossed, rules broken, alliances formed in the shadows. The overseer had declared war, quietly and ruthlessly, and Daniel understood, with a clarity sharper than pain. The night settled over the plantation in a way Daniel had never felt before. Too quiet, too still, like the whole land was waiting for something to break. Even the crickets sounded cautious, chirping in short, hesitant bursts. A thin mist rolled across the yard, making the lantern lights look distant and ghost-like. Daniel stood near the stable entrance, leaning against the doorframe, watching the darkness drift. He wasn't supposed to be alone. That was the rule now. Isaac had stepped away only a minute ago to fetch water, promising to be right back. But Daniel needed these few seconds. He needed air in his lungs, even if it tasted like danger. Mrs. Bell had insisted he stay in lighted areas and near others, but the day's chores had worn him down. His ribs ached, his shoulder throbbed, and a small cut near his temple kept bleeding whenever he wasn't careful. Still, he'd taken every warning seriously. Every shadow made him turn. Every rustle made him tense. He knew the overseer was somewhere watching, waiting for the right moment. The reckoning wasn't coming tomorrow. It was coming tonight. Daniel sensed it deep in his bones. He was right. Isaac reappeared, carrying a wooden dipper and a bucket. Here, he said softly, handing Daniel the water. You sure you okay standing? We can go back inside. A crack echoed across the yard. A twig snapping. Both men froze. Isaac's eyes widened. He's out there. Daniel didn't answer. His hand tightened around the dipper. The lantern beside the stable flickered once, dimming as if afraid. Stay close, Isaac whispered, moving beside him. Daniel nodded. A second sound followed, the unmistakable crunch of boots on hard-packed dirt. Isaac gripped Daniel's arm. We should get to the house. Get to her. Before they could move, another sound cut through the night. Daniel. It was Mrs. Bell's voice, sharp, urgent, calling from the direction of the garden path. Both men turned toward it. That moment, those 2 seconds, that tiny shift of their bodies, was all the overseer needed. He lunged from the shadows behind the stable, rage twisting his face like something animal. He held a length of rope in one hand and a small hunting knife in the other. Not a big blade, nothing dramatic, but deadly enough if aimed right. Isaac shouted, Daniel! Daniel spun, just in time to avoid the first strike. The knife sliced through air where his ribs had been moments ago. Daniel stumbled backward, heart pounding, pain ripping through him from the sudden movement. The overseer swung again. Daniel blocked it with his forearm, the blade grazing his skin, leaving a burning line of blood. He clenched his teeth and shoved the overseer back, but the man was too fueled by fury to fall far. You should have died in that barn. The overseer spat. his voice raw with hatred. You humiliated me. You made her look at you like. He cut himself off with a snarl and charged. Isaac tried to throw himself between them, but the overseer struck him across the face with the rope handle, knocking him to the ground. Daniel had no choice. He backed away from the stable, pulling the overseer with him, trying to move toward the house lights, toward witnesses. But the overseer anticipated it, cutting him off, pushing him further into darkness. You ain't walking out of this night, he hissed. Daniel's mind spun desperately. He couldn't outrun him. He couldn't outfight him, not while wounded. But he could outthink him. He moved sideways toward the corral, toward the fence where the ground dipped unevenly. The overseer swung again, but Daniel ducked under it, grabbing the man's wrist. The knife sliced the air above his back. Daniel shoved the overseer toward the dip in the ground. The man stumbled. Daniel went for the knife, grabbing his wrist, trying to twist it free. The overseer was stronger, bigger. But Daniel had something else driving him now, not survival alone, but the knowledge that if he fell here, the overseer's rage would reach Isaac, Mrs. Bell, maybe even the children in the barn. The overseer slammed his knee into Daniel's stomach. Daniel coughed, almost dropping to his knees. The knife's edge brushed his throat. And then, a voice cut through the night like thunder. Stop! Mrs. Bell's lantern swung wildly as she ran toward them, skirts gathered in her hands. Her breath came in gasps, but her eyes were fierce. The overseer looked up, startled, and that split-second distraction was enough. Daniel twisted the man's arm hard. The knife clattered to the ground. The overseer shouted in pain, swinging blindly. Daniel ducked and rammed his shoulder into the man's chest, sending them both crashing into the corral fence. Wood splintered. The overseer fell, breath knocked from him. Mrs. Bell reached Daniel's side, grabbing his arm. Come now before he gets up. But the overseer did get up, faster than either of them expected. He lunged for the knife. Mrs. Bell screamed. Isaac, staggering but still conscious, grabbed a loose fence post, half broken from the crash, and hurled it at the overseer with all his strength. It struck the overseer's side. He crumpled with a howl, the knife skidding across the dirt again. Daniel didn't hesitate this time. He kicked the knife far into the grass, out of reach. The overseer tried to rise, but Isaac pinned him, breathing hard, shaking with adrenaline. The overseer struggled beneath him, cursing, thrashing, but Isaac held tight. Mrs. Bell stepped closer, lantern trembling in her grasp. It's over, she whispered, voice shaking. No, the overseer hissed, glaring at Daniel with a hatred that seemed bottomless. Ain't over. Ain't ever over. But he was wrong, because another voice echoed across the yard, deep, commanding, unmistakable. What is the meaning of this? Master Reynolds emerged from the darkness, rifle in hand, two farm hands running behind him. His eyes took in the scene, the overseer pinned to the ground, Daniel bruised and bleeding, Mrs. Bell clutching the lantern, Isaac trembling. The overseer's face shifted instantly, contorting into the mask of a desperate liar. Master, he cried. They attacked me. The slave tried to kill me. MRS. Bell's protecting him, she. Enough. The master's voice cracked like a whip. He walked closer, studying the dirt, the blood trails, the knife lying yards away. What happened? He demanded. Is the truth. The overseer swallowed, trying to speak, but Mrs. Bell stepped forward before he could. He attempted to kill Daniel, she said, voice steady despite her shaking hands. I saw it. Isaac saw it. Daniel defended himself. The overseer's eyes widened in rage. She's lying. She's defending. Master Reynolds raised the rifle slightly. It's over, he growled. Get off my land. The overseer froze. Master. Now. The farm hands grabbed the overseer under the arms, dragging him to his feet despite his screams of protest. I ain't leaving, he shouted. You'll regret this. He's a liar. She's lying. They're all. Throw him beyond the gate, the master ordered coldly. If he steps back on my property, I'll put him in the ground myself. The overseer's shouts faded as they dragged him into the distance. Silence fell again. Only this time, it felt like breath returning to the plantation, air filling the spaces fear had held tight. Mrs. Bell rushed to Daniel, placing a steadying hand on his back as he swayed. "It's over," she whispered, voice breaking at last. "It's truly over now." Daniel looked toward the gate where the overseer had vanished. "No," he said softly. "It ain't over." She swallowed. "Daniel, it's better," he said. "Safer. But men like him, they carry hate with them. It don't stay quiet for long." Mrs. Bell lowered her eyes. "Then we will be prepared." Isaac leaned heavily against the fence, nodding. "We stick together. We watch each other's backs. Like tonight." Daniel breathed in slowly, feeling the weight of the night settling into something different. Not relief, not victory, something deeper. Change. Master Reynolds approached then, face stern but not unkind. He studied Daniel with a long, searching gaze. "You defended yourself," he said finally. "No man will be punished for surviving an attack." Daniel nodded, too exhausted to speak. The master looked at Mrs. Bell. Something passed between them, a silent understanding, a recognition of the danger they had averted and the cost of it. "Come," he said quietly. "Let's get everyone inside." The group walked slowly toward the house lights, Daniel supported between Isaac and Mrs. Bell. Behind them, the night felt wider, calmer, almost breathing again. Mrs. Bell spoke softly, almost to herself. "This land. Things won't be the same after tonight." Daniel glanced at her, his voice rough. "Maybe that's a good thing." Her eyes met his, tired, frightened, but undeniably strong. "Maybe it is." As they neared the porch, Daniel looked back one last time at the dark stable yard. The mist was thinning, the lantern flickering steady again. The shadows didn't feel as sharp. The silence didn't feel like a trap. And he realized something. He had survived. Not because he was stronger, not because he was luckier, but because people who should have had no reason to stand by him did. And that changed everything. When he stepped up onto the porch, he felt the weight of the night settle behind him, closing like a chapter in a book too heavy to lift again. Tomorrow, the fields would still need tending. Life would still be hard. Danger would still exist. But he'd face it with eyes open, and with allies he never expected. That's the quiet truth of nights like this. They don't end in triumph. They end in clarity. Daniel walked inside, knowing one truth above all others. Survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning.